Unaendelea vipi? Unajua we still have this Tanzania.
Kwa kudra ya Mwenyezi Mungu, we are fine.
We're fine.
And when you are dealing with matters as live as we see in the region and in the continent, there are many opinions, and that is what we should encourage.
We should encourage.
We should encourage people to speak their minds on the basis of the evidence that is available to them. They should then help. And many times what people do not know is that those who come out and speak actually mean well.
But it looks like dissent is becoming a threat in especially East Africa.
Is the name of the game, because the intolerance is becoming something that is taking space in East Africa. Those in political leadership do not want alternative views. But democracy, the thing we call democracy, is about competition of ideas. You put the ideas in the marketplace, and those who make the choice then decide which is the better idea.
But why do we have, because we've seen it, we've had Kenyans abducted in Uganda, we've had a Tanzanian abducted in Kenya, we have had a Ugandan abducted in Kenya also, Kizza Besigye. When you look at all these happenings, and then the other day we had even a headline that says it's a trinity of horror. What's the thing with these three presidents?
You know, I feel pain, because those who are heads of state in this region are people that are known to us. They are people who, if you look at their history, at least some of them, you can say that they had good ideas. If I look at Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and his views in the 1980s when he was in the forefront of the liberation of Uganda, his clarity and his vision could not be questioned. He took the view that people should not stay in power for too long. He took the view that he should have successors. He took the view that views should be articulated. It therefore pains some of us who are sympathetic to that history to see the level of intolerance. Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan came from a history and a legacy of a great man, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, who believed in a competition of ideas. Nyerere would attend the University of Dar es Salaam and debate with students. And it therefore pains us, those who are sympathetic to that history and that legacy, to see the level of intolerance. I do not agree with my good friend Tindi Lisu on many issues, but I don't believe that he has committed the offense known to law as treason on the basis of the evidence that is available. Yeah. And I do not believe that when you are going into an election, you ban people from participating in the election. It is the electorate that should make that decision. And if the electorate is not made or given the opportunity to make that decision, then whatever outcome there is illegitimate.
So are you saying she's an illegitimate president?
There is a crisis of legitimacy. You know, many people don't make this distinction, that which is legal is not necessarily right. So from a legal perspective, he has gone through the process of the electoral process as prescribed under Tanzanian law. So to that extent, her presidency is legal. But is her presidency legitimate and anchored in morality as seen by the reasonable public opinion? The answer to that question is no. It is no, because when you hear voices of reason, and the voices of reason that I know and that I talk to are actually sympathetic to Tanzania. Because then Tanzania is the only country, or was the only country, where ethnicity had been killed as the basis of mobilization. Its economy is on the up. For it to happen that through an electoral period, people die, it is painful. And it is for the love of Tanzania that we see this pain. Kenya, of course, to complete the circle, is also problematic. It is in this country that Nnamdi Kanu was abducted, and I acted for Nnamdi Kanu, and we have gotten a judgment in his favor. The government has been condemned to pay 10 million and taken to Nigeria, and is in prison in Nigeria. It is in this country that Kizza Besigye was abducted. It cannot be right. If you look at international law, rendition is something that we should not allow. People should be allowed to exercise their democratic rights, even if we don't agree with them. So you see, there is a crisis. We are signatories to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We are signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all the UN charters. Why do we create an environment where people who don't agree with us become our enemies? It is a competition of ideas, so that what is happening in this region is that fear is being used by those in political leadership as an instrument of paralyzing the population into silence.
Will the population agree to that when you look at it?
History is consistent that you can only paralyze a population for so long. The things that we see, for example, that we saw in the Arab Spring that brought down governments, what we have seen in the streets of Africa, it started in Nairobi, Kenya. It did not go the full length. We saw it in Cameroon. It did not go the full length. We saw it in Abidjan. It did not go the full length. We saw it in Dar es Salaam. It did not go the full length. It went the full length in Madagascar. It went the full length in Bangladesh. It went the full length in Nepal. Demonstration and protest is the language of the unheard. And wisdom has always required and demanded at once that you listen to people, because you are a trustee. To hold public office, why do we call people in public office honorable? It is not because of them. It is the office that we honor. Why do we call them excellencies? They are not, or may not even be excellent. Many times in Africa, they are not. But it is the institution, the offices that they hold for the sake of the nation. When they begin to think that they are demigods, they must remember there was a French Revolution. They must remember that there was the Turkish Revolt. They must remember that people rose, the student protests in 1960s in Europe. They must remember that the colonialist was here and they left. And the sooner they do so, they must remember that recently Bashar al-Assad left for Moscow with a suitcase. They must remember that Rajuel in Madagascar disappeared. We do not know where they are. They must remember that Sheikh Hasina is hiding. Nobody knows where she is.
When we get to a point, and it's very interesting, you give live scenarios that we're experiencing now. But then on the other hand, you look at it, when our citizens, Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo, had been missing for 38 days, then they are released. And then on the same day, the president of Uganda confesses that we arrested them because I was told they are expert rioters, and I kept them in a fridge. Of course, yesterday we see the PS Singwei saying it was metaphorical for him to use that. But when a president confesses to arrest other citizens, yet the foreign affairs of Kenya doesn't seem like...
You know, I know both Njagi, I know Oyo. These are young men who mean well. They mean well. They feel pain for Kenya, they feel pain for humanity, they feel pain for the black man. when they went to Uganda, they were showing solidarity with one of the candidates. It is their right to do so. Of course, it is always wise to remember that when you're in a foreign country, the rules may be different. But when a national of a country is detained by a sister or brother country, it is incumbent upon that country's foreign affairs to be involved. You know, when I see the headlines of the Standard newspaper on the 13th day of November 2025 saying, we need diplomacy, you cannot contradict them. You cannot contradict them. Why do we have an embassy in Uganda? Did we see any attempt at negotiation? Did we see? We did not. It is important that we take care of our citizens wherever they are, even when they are in trouble, particularly when they are in trouble. We had surrendered to the situation. If it had happened that it is their dead bodies that were delivered, our country would just have said, Hewala.
So, is our top diplomat, CS Musalia Mudavadi, doing his job? Is he up to the task? Has he failed the country?
The cabinet secretary for the time being, Mr. Musalia Mudavadi, is somebody that I know. But I'm afraid to say that he has not discharged his functions to the best of the expectations of the people of Kenya.
What would be the limitations? Or what would be that is holding him?
The question is, what is our foreign policy as a country? We may have papers that say this is our foreign policy, but diplomacy has a history to it. If you look at history, why do countries have foreign envoys? Countries have foreign envoys as number one, as a demonstration of the good relationship with the countries in which they are accredited. Countries have envoys for purpose of ensuring that their citizens in those spaces are protected. The cabinet secretary in the Kenyan arrangement is the chief diplomat. The ambassadors are appointed, of course, as the representatives of the head of state, and they're expected to protect their citizens. We want to hear them. This country has had foreign ministers who came out and articulated things on behalf of the Republic of Kenya firmly. I remember Munywa Wayaki discharging his functions firmly. I remember Robert Ouko. And whether you disagreed with them or not, they occupied those positions with dignity, and they were heard and they were respected. I'm nostalgic about those days. But today, and I know, and I am involved in a number of cases of Kenyans who are outside and are suffering outside of the Republic of Kenya, and you ask for assistance, not even an acknowledgement letter is written to you.
We've even lost citizens in Tanzania.
And nobody appears to be bothered. We have citizens in Dubai who are detained. Nobody is talking about them. We have citizens in the United States of America. Nobody is talking about them. And one therefore wonders, why do we have these individuals who are paid using taxpayers' money in those spaces? There is no shortage of Kenyans who can discharge this function. And when we speak as we do, then we are vilified and demonized. And they use the Swahili word, wachache wasiotosheka. How can we be satisfied when we can see that pain is being visited upon our kith and kin? We cannot be satisfied. We cannot afford that luxury. I would have thought right now, in light of what is going on in the East African region, in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Somalia, and Democratic Republic of Congo and Burundi, I would have thought that an extraordinary meeting of the East African community would be summoned to discuss the crisis, because there is a crisis in the region. I would have thought that this is the time to convene such a meeting, to discuss what is happening, because the East African community is threatened. We thought that we would now be moving towards integration. But listen to the rhetoric. Are we talking as people who are moving towards integration?
We've even been threatened by about the Indian Ocean accessed by
the
president of Uganda. Yeah. And I don't think Kenya has said a thing.
Kenya has not said a thing. Perhaps that is wise diplomatically. I believe that what we should do as a country is to engage the president of the Republic of Uganda. And our communication should be that the ocean is for us to share. This is a common right. We have a duty, and some of us, in order to give meaning to those relationships, say that Uganda is not landlocked, Uganda is land-linked. South Sudan is not landlocked, is land-linked. Burundi is not landlocked, it is land-linked. Rwanda is not landlocked, is land-linked. In other words, the ports of Bagamoyo in Tanzania, Tanga, Mtwara, the port of Mombasa, the port of Lamu are available to them. If there are any hitches, these are things that should be handled diplomatically. And if we engage in that space and we are moving towards integration, even that kind of rhetoric becomes unnecessary. And this is why I hold the view that there are so many issues flying around in the East African region that it is necessary for the heads of states and government to do a quick meeting. And once they have done the quick meeting and have identified the issues, then the issues for determination can be cascaded to the relevant ministers, and the relevant ministers then cascade it to the bureaucrats.
Is it that we're too expectant of these leaders to do that? Because you've, of course, pointed out the election of Samia is questionable.
Yes.
When you look at it. But these same presidents, we are saying ought to have a meeting, were the first to send their congratulations, and yet people are dying. They said nothing about it.
You know, we are also in a space of what I call hear no wrong, see no wrong, be politically correct. And in this era of political correctness, a lot of things are being swept under the carpet. But who is your friend? He or she is your friend who tells you that you have made a mistake. Because if you have a friend that does not tell you the mistakes you have made, then you don't need enemies. And that is, in my view, the space in which we find ourselves. Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, whom I know and respect, will have it very difficult to even travel outside of Tanzania. It will not be easy, because the environment is being created in which wherever she will be going, there'll be people who will be questioned. And I travel across the continent of Africa, and I read the sentiments across the continent of Africa. They are not favorable. So the first thing that would have done would be to say, yes, you have an election. Perhaps we cannot take it back, but engage the opposition. Release everybody who is in detention. Because governance sometimes requires forgiveness. Release all of them. Enter into negotiations with them. Begin the process of constitution review so that Tanzanians have a conversation. Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere said it many years ago, that the moment you stop listening to the people, that is the moment you expose yourself to danger. The moment you dismiss your population as nincompoops who have nothing to offer, that is the moment you begin to lose it. The moment you begin to believe that you have a monopoly of knowledge and wisdom and that you cannot be advised, that is the moment you begin to lose it. And history is consistent. It has examples. So we must have the moral courage to speak the truth and let the chips fall where they are and where they may. And you know, when you are a speaker of the truth, you don't need to rehearse. It is liars who rehearse. Speakers of truth just speak the truth because they mean well, even when it does not appear as if they do.
Do you think she means well? Because you're saying they ought to have had conversations before.
Yes.
But just the other day, the deputy party leader of Chadema had been arrested again, I think on Monday, Tuesday. John Heche, and released. When they were released, they were asked what happened. They were saying they didn't even question us. There was nothing major. So when you look at it, how is this presidency, this term going to be like for her?
In my view, if it continues in this way, it's going to be very painful. Because when you are in a space where you are not engaging those who you consider to be your opponents, your political opponents are not your enemies. You are all talking about the same country, just the perspective. Some people think the country should be run this way in matters agriculture, in matters health, but otherwise you are working towards the benefit of the same country. But if you consider your political opponents as your mortal enemies, then you end up being paranoid. You see enemies emerging from every corner, even when they are not there. You begin to have enemies, real and imagined. And when you are in that space, then you are in a very dangerous space. And that is why it is incumbent upon those who mean well for these conversations to begin in earnest. In this country, to our credit, whenever we have found ourselves in such situations, whenever we were on the brink, we have had these painful conversations. In 2007, 2008, the country was on the brink, and we had painful conversations. We made painful decisions. We created offices that were not necessary, sometimes just to massage people's egos in order to calm the temperatures and protect the country. Sometimes it becomes necessary for the long-term health of the country, because if you don't, then the country can collapse. Ask Sudan. The country has collapsed. Ask Central African Republic. The country has collapsed. Ask the Cameroonians. The country is collapsing. Ask our good friend, the Somalis, how long it has taken to rebuild that country again. So there are examples, but it is tragic that it appears that we do not learn anything from history and examples that are before us. We say we are different. No, history is consistent.
They say we are Tanzania, we're not Kenya. But there are conversations that this could be somehow the end of the reign of CCM as a party as we have known it. And also there are questions as to why former President Jakaya Kikwete has been quiet all this time. Yet when Kenya was actually going through the turmoil in 2007, he was a key figure.
You know, Chama cha Mapinduzi has a history. And you remember that Chama cha Mapinduzi has its origin in the union between TANU, Tanganyika African National Union, of Mwalimu Nyerere at that time, and Afro-Shirazi of Sheikh Amani Abeid Karume in 1964. And after that, it became Chama cha Mapinduzi in 1977. And is a party with roots. Chama cha Mapinduzi is a political party with roots in the villages and hamlets of Tanzania, in people's hearts. Of course, when multi-party came and the political space was opened, we have seen the emergence of parties such as Chadema, ACT, Mazalendo, CAF, and all these other parties, both in mainland Tanzania and in Zanzibar. And Nyerere in 1995, when he was called at the meeting of CCM to give a speech on who ought to be the candidate for Chama cha Mapinduzi, he said three things. Lazima tumchague mtu ambaye hana udini na ukabila. A candidate who will not use ethnicity and religion for political mobilization. Lazima tumchague mtu ambaye ataipiga vita rushwa Somebody will fight corruption. And he's made these words, which are taken from the Arusha Declaration. He said, rushwa ni adui ya nchi, sitatoa wala sitapokea. Corruption is the enemy of the nation. I'll not give and I'll not receive. And he warned them that if we do not have that candidate within Chama cha Mapinduzi, that candidate will come from somewhere else. Those words of Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere ring true to my mind to date. And he said, once again in Swahili, siri ya maendeleo ni watu, ardhi na siasa safi. People, land, and clean politics. And he then said, siri ya maendeleo ni vijana wenye malezi bora, siha njema na bongo kali. Young people who are well-bred and are sharp. He said this thing. And Tanzanians know. They are playing those snippets in Tanzania even now. But unfortunately, to answer your question directly, CCM has now been shaken. But it's still a party that you cannot dismiss. CCM is in the tradition of African National Congress.
Which
they
was
don't
also
collapse.
shaken.
They are shaken, but they don't collapse immediately. It is in the tradition of Frelimo in Mozambique. They are shaken, but they don't collapse immediately. They are in the tradition of SWAPO in Namibia. They can be shaken, but they don't collapse. In tradition of MPLA in Angola, the tradition of ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, because they have credentials over a long period. But you must have a sense of history. And that is what brings me to your question about Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, who, as a former president, retired president, who was very present in attempts at negotiation, many Tanzanians are asking, where is Jakaya? We want to hear Jakaya's voice. And many are speculating that perhaps he has been too intimately involved, quietly. And that is why he is not coming out. But I want to give him the benefit of doubt. Jakaya, come out. Nyerere used to say, you are not successful until your successor succeeds. He has a history, a vested interest in ensuring that Tanzania does not collapse, that the legacy of Nyerere, the legacy of Mzee Mwinyi, the legacy of Mkapa, the legacy of John Joseph Pombe Magufuli are preserved for this generation and generations yet to be born. Tanzanians are posing these painful and difficult questions, and they must be answered. They cannot be wished away. Anybody who thinks that what has happened can be wished away is deluding themselves. In the history of any country, whenever there has been death, it is never the same again. The age of innocence is gone.
and they have to deal with it.
Oh, you've got to
like
deal
it
with
or
it.
not.
Whether you like it or not, there are families that are hurting. And in this era of social media, before the truth takes the stairs, lies have taken the elevator.
Yeah. So is it possible that we're going to see, you see, in South Africa, we saw ANC, due to what happened, they had to have like a coalition sort of with the DA party. And somehow they had to move. Are we going to see this? Is it likely that we'll see the same with CCM and maybe parties like Chadema?
You know, if I was asked by the government of the Republic of Tanzania, led by CCM, please advise us, this is what I would tell them. Number one, call a meeting presided over by Samia Suluhu Hassan of all registered political parties in Tanzania. All of them. Once you've called that meeting, call a meeting of all active and legitimate civil society organizations in Tanzania. Have a meeting with them. Call a meeting of all organized religious societies in Tanzania. Have a meeting with them. Once you've done that, get into a government of national unity. It happened in Kenya. It happened in South Africa. It happened in Zimbabwe. Once you have done so, release anybody who has been arrested on politically related charges. Those who are criminals, deal with them. The criminals deal with, but any person who has been arrested on politically related charges, release them. After you have done that, now go back to what the opposition has been talking about, that the Tanzanian constitution needs to be dealt with. Remember that under Tanzanian law, there is no opportunity to go to court, which is unfortunate and ought to have been done. Because if there was that avenue, then the opposition would have gone to court. We would now be listening to the arguments in court as to the legitimacy or otherwise of the electoral results. You start this process and give yourself time. You say, we are going to do this constitution for the next 2 years. Once we do this constitution for the next 2 years or maximum 3 years, then on the basis of that, in the following year, we create structures that have been created under the constitution. And in the 4th year, earlier than the next scheduled election, we call elections on the basis of the new constitution. And I, Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, will not offer myself for re-election. History will remember him in a totally different way, and historians and even his perceived political enemies will forgive him. That is the kind of candid advice that the president now needs. But unfortunately, in this day and age, she will have no shortage of advisors. Kumwambia mama, hao ni wababaishaji tu. Hao ni wahuni tu, wanafiki tu. They'll tell her. Na hao wengine ambao wanakuambia wanakupa ushauri tofauti, ushauri mbadala. Ni wababaishaji tu. Si ni Wakenya tu.
By the way, what's this beef between Kenya and Tanzania?
It's historical. The beef between Kenya and Tanzania is historical. Remember, and I'm a student of East African community, I've written about it. If you remember when Kenya was, when the first community collapsed, our foreign policy was always ambivalent, even during the struggle against apartheid. While Tanzania had clarity and was in the frontline states, ours was ambivalent. Kenya and Malawi were not quite clear. Even when Jomo Kenyatta mediated the problem in Angola, there was no clarity. That is number one. Number two, we took a totally different path in the 1960s in terms of our politics. In session of paper number 10 of 1965, we say that is African socialism, but we were much more inclined to what was then characterized as capitalism. Tanzania, on the other hand, was much more inclined to a system which was unique to them, ujamaa, which was, of course, nationalization of assets and therefore socialistic. And then we appeared as if, on average, we are arrogant and contemptuous of others. And Tanzanians tend to be a lot more polite, even when they are arresting you, as they say in Tanzania, the police officers request that naomba nikutie nguvuni. So our perceived arrogance, and there is something when the East African community was collapsing, what was called the Nairobi mentality. The Nairobi mentality is the misguided belief by Kenyan officialdom that we are better than everybody in East Africa. And that rubs the Tanzanians the wrong way. And unfortunately, over the years, we have not succeeded in changing that image. And it's not all Kenyans who are in that space. It's only a few. But remember, stereotyping is something that takes root and is very difficult to eliminate. And that is the reason why even now we are seen to be anti-Tanzania. And it doesn't help when the Tanzanians have a problem and we are seen to be in a celebratory mood in certain quarters. It doesn't help.
And also see, I mean, when you look at the election that was, I mean, Kenya really pushed for Tanzanians overall in
Yes.
terms of their liberation, quote unquote,
Yes.
and just for the human rights, I think.
Yes.
So,
And the other thing that we don't talk about, there are a lot of non-governmental organizations which are very active, Western funded here, which are very active in Kenya and therefore a lot more vocal. But the Tanzanians have a different history. And part of the reason why Tanzanians also fear interacting with us too intimately is the ethnicity in our politics. I know a Tanzanian friend of mine who said, hatutaki wa Kenya watuambukize na siasa za ukabila. And that is legitimate.
That's very
that
true,
is a legitimate concern. Yeah. That the more we interact with them, the more we are going to export what they consider to have political bad manners, where we organize ourselves around Koyo, Luo, Kamba, Luhia, and Kalenjin. In Tanzania, nobody talks about that. People, there are more ethnicities, but they talk about Vyama, they talk about CCM, they talk about Chadema, they talk about ACT Wazalendo, they talk about CAF. And to that, we must praise Tanzania and praise Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere.
Yeah. When you look at the whole idea of bringing the East African together, of course, there's a treaty that was signed so that these nations, are able to work together. But when we look at it, what are the achievements that EAC has had that we can proudly say Jumuiya has been worth having? Because now we just have an organization that really we can't tell what it's doing.
I would be a little more charitable to the East African community and look at it at two levels. What I call East African Community 1, which collapsed in 1977, perhaps was much more practical in the manner in which it affected people's lives. We had the East African Railways, East African Post and Telecommunication, East African Airways, and people could work. A Kenyan could work in Kasese. A students from Kenya studied law in Dar es Salaam, others in Makerere. There was easy movement of people. We had one common currency. Those were the golden years of East African community. Then we allowed it to collapse. When the East African community was resuscitated or revived in 1990s, we thought we had learned the lessons of the collapse of the first community. But unfortunately, I don't think we have, because the suspicions still remain alive. So it is true to say that there are areas where we are collaborating. If you look at the ease, the free movement of peoples, that is something to be commended. I think between Kenya and Uganda, we use identity cards to move. We see buses plying Tanzania and the Kenyan routes, Rwanda up to Burundi. We see people trading across the region. So there are things that you can talk about that affect people's lives. In the borders are porous. You go to the border in Arusha, the Taita Taveta area is porous. You go to Isebania, the same thing. Go to Kenya-Uganda border. Go to Rwanda, it's porous. Between Rwanda and Burundi is a different kettle of fish. So people to people, there is a sense in which we are doing very well. Where we are not doing well is at the official level, where we talk about tariff and non-tariff barriers, we talk about common market, we talk about harmonization of education. These are the areas where you don't see the dividends. And then we went on this expansion mode, where we brought in countries which were not traditionally within the East Africa, the original East Africa. In Europe, which has a better method, before a country becomes a member, you become a candidate under the Copenhagen rules. So that we bring your economy up to scratch, so that Burundi would have been a candidate first. Rwanda is a good candidate because it has this act together. Somalia would have been a candidate. The Democratic Republic of Congo would have been a candidate. South Sudan would have been a candidate. But that is water under the bridge. The net effect of this is that we are not harmonized. That is why you see the Congo is a member but behaves the way it is behaving. And then the other thing is multiple membership in regional organization. Tanzania is a member of SADC for historical reason. Congo is a member of SADC for historical reason. And for that reason, you have countries which are sometimes sleeping on the same bed, but they have different dreams. And people are questioning that. Remember, in 2004, there was the fast tracking of political federation. If you look at the treaty, it says it's called Common Market, Customs Union, and ultimately political federation. But in 2004, the heads of states and government said, let us expedite political federation. And if we had expedited, the first president of East African Federation should have been sworn in on the first day of January, the year 2010. All the landmarks have not been fulfilled. We ought to have had a common currency. We ought to have had a common working customs union. We ought to have harmonized our education. All these have not happened. And as I talk now, I see the centrifugal forces are becoming stronger and stronger by the day. So there are things, there are dividends that you can say these are the dividends that we have earned out of the East African community, and that we are sharing a number of things. But we are saying on a scale of 1 to 10, we are performing at 4. We ought to be performing at 8. And that is our concern. And when you hear that countries have not made their contribution to the East African community and that workers are not being paid, then you get worried. Kenya makes a contribution. I think they have made 100% contribution as I speak.
Leading. Yes.
I think Tanzania has made part of our contribution. Rwanda has made part of our contribution. Uganda has made part of our contribution. Somalia also did make a contribution. Democratic Republic of Congo, zilch.
Nothing.
Burundi, zilch.
But are we expecting too much from countries like Congo? Yet we are being accused of being the perpetrators of the war. Like we are playing a part of the war that is happening, and then we expect them to pay. I mean, what relations are those?
That is the confusion, Sarah. This is the confusion. That if we are part of the same family in certain cases, and we are also undermining members of the same family. You've seen, for example, that the Kinshasa government had a problem with us. They had a problem with us when Kenya had a candidate for the African Union. We misbehaved. And they went away. Right now, we have accommodated leaders who are seen to be anti-Kinshasa administration. So there is a sense in which there is no coherent terms of engagement. On paper and at treaty level, you may say, but the treaty is clear. But the treaty is a broad document. What are the necessary, ordinary, practical terms of engagement? What are the taboos that we just don't engage in? And what are the ethical issues that we must engage in as part of the community? You know, the European Union borrowed from many things from the original East African community. And you can see whenever there is a problem within the EU, like them or hate them, they call each other to order. But we don't. And I agree with you that, look at, for example, when we had a force in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they told us, go away.
Yeah.
They went to SADC. So that is the problem. You call a physical meeting, people are not willing to attend. You call a virtual meeting, they are not willing to attend. So we must rethink and revisit the fundamentals.
And people have been questioning in terms of the people in leadership and questioning that we need to have conversations.
Yeah.
But then the people we expect to have conversations with are actually the warlords.
You know, we have this, there's something that I call gramophone diplomacy, where the things you ought to say silently are the things that you are speaking at public rallies and in press conferences. You poison the environment. That is gramophone diplomacy, sometimes described when it escalates into gunboat diplomacy. Proper diplomacy, diplomats will guide us, requires that things are done subterraneanly, under the water. You only see the submarine when it is emerging, but the things that he has done are great. So I hold the view that if we were to change tack and to avoid what I call political grandstanding, there is too much grandstanding in the region. Everybody wants to appear to be the big kahuna, and we must liberate ourselves from that kind of situation if we are to make this region function, particularly at the people-to-people level. Because these political things that you see, they affect people-to-people relationship. Somebody was buying onions in Tanzania is now impeded. Somebody was buying bananas in Uganda is impeded. Somebody was riding in the ENA bus from Nairobi to Rwanda is now impeded. Is that necessary? Is that leadership? Is that what we want in the region? Is that what will make Africans to work together when we are talking about Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Beyond the rhetoric? These are critical questions. And unfortunately, we are not engaging in these issues or engaging with them as intimately and as practically as we should.
The SADC, after the elections in Tanzania, SADC was seen to be like one of the bodies that actually called out and spoke the truth, while EAC, African Union, they all massaged and went around it and not spoke out. Do you think then the relationship that Tanzania is going to have with SADC moving forward is going to be the same?
I've read the reports. I've read the SADC report. I've read the AUC report. I've read the report of the East African Community. And I think if you look at the dishonest reports, they say many things, this was prepared. But you see, if you have a cup of coffee like this, the coffee is good and noble. But when a fly gets into it, you pour the whole thing out. This is what we are saying. That no matter how good it was, a fly has dropped. We cannot just continue to drink it. We have to remove the fly and possibly take the coffee to be boiled again, so that if there was any germs there, it is killed in the heat. And I hold the view that when sobriety returns, it is the SADC report that will be seen to have been more honest than all these other reports, which are simply massaging egos.
Let's just wait and see how that goes.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
Yes.
Looking across the continent, of course, there have been demonstrations across from the east to south to the west and everywhere. And recently we saw the president of Zambia stoned in, I think, one of the campaigns moving. He was moving around.
Yes.
I mean, our own president in Kenya, someone once threw, was it a shoe or something?
Yes.
When you see these things, and the young people say it's a dissatisfaction, and they're finding ways to communicate. Do you think this older generation understands the frustration that the youth have?
If they don't, they are better. And I've said this on a number of occasions. The crowd, and borrowing from the Bible, the crowd that tells you Hosanna in the highest is the very same crowd that cries, crucify him. Because young people are impatient. Young people can see people in political leadership becoming overnight millionaires. And they are graduating as engineers, as lawyers, as doctors, as teachers, and they cannot get jobs. Or if they get them, they are not paid. And if they are paid a pittance. They look at their countries and they see a presidential motorcade with 20 cars complete with a toilet. And they say, how can we allow this kind of provocation? Look at Madagascar. Andy Rajwell himself came to power via the streets. promising to solve basic things, water and electricity. 16 years down the line, no water, no electricity in Antananarivo. The people are saying, and we have been paying taxes. Kenya, look at your electricity bills. Look at the taxes that you pay. Somebody is sending me a book via DHL from Lagos, Nigeria. And there is even railway levy that I'm supposed to pay. Housing levy. You go to all these countries. You go to Cameroon. Students have not gone to school in southern Cameroon and be at 92. Rigs an election. Go to Abidjan. Alison Ouattara, Baz Bagbo, and others from contesting the election. Then he says, I've been elected. You go to Sudan, 12 million displaced people, refugees. The country is being divided effectively into 4 units. If you are in positions of leadership, wouldn't you be worried? Shouldn't you be worried? Shouldn't you be engaging your people? Shouldn't you be asking young people? Shouldn't you be visiting them at university? Shouldn't you be talking to the civil society? Shouldn't you be talking to the religious community? Shouldn't you be a listening head of state? Shouldn't you cut down your opulence? Shouldn't you stop giving money in hundreds of millions in different spaces when your own population is suffering, cannot eat? Shouldn't you be frugal? Shouldn't you be afraid? I'm telling African politicians, you had better be scared. You had better be scared or change course.
I think they better change the course as soon as possible. The other day, our president was in Qatar and did an interview with Al Jazeera. And there are things that stood out for me. One was the question about engagement with Sudan, RSF. And in his response, he said that he hosted human rights group, women and all that. Yet, what we have seen on video, even actually the poster is still on his Twitter account and maybe Facebook, is him with the generals. And we've even seen investigation stories done that have guns in Tanzania, in Sudan that treat Kenya. When such things happen, what are we doing about our country?
You know, when I watched that interview, I may be wrong, but it may be some PR firm, image cleaning firm, that is telling our president, do a major interview in Al Jazeera. They may also recommend him, do a major interview with BBC, do a major interview with CNN, do a major interview with all these outlets to clean your image. But facts are stubborn. They stand out. We are not stupid, even if others may think we are. The ease with which we have seen leading figures in the RSF operating in Nairobi, and is all on record, our newspapers have them, is not going to be erased by a single statement in an interview with Al Jazeera. What we must do is to change course. There is a recognized government in Khartoum. Whether you like it or not, engage with it. Diplomatically, if you are accommodating people from that country, let the embassy of Sudan know it. We have an embassy of Sudan here in Nairobi. Did they approve?
Just so they haven't paid rent for.
Yes, that is south.
How long?
Yes. So engage with them. Tell them, we have the embassy of the Democratic Republic of Congo here. When their nationals are coming here, particularly of a certain level, it is good manners to engage them. At the Pan-African Institute, we just invited President Serese Kama, Ian Kama, as our guest. But we informed the Embassy of Botswana. We informed the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Everybody was aware that former President Ian Kama was in this country. Jewel Taylor was to come here from Liberia. We informed everybody. When Julius Selo Malema was here 2 years ago, I informed everybody in officialdom because it is good manners, and I'm not even in government. It is just good manners. And if we continue as a people to be mannerless, the world will treat us with contempt. And one of the things that we must remind our leaders is this: you are not demigods. The offices you hold in trust for us. You must do that which is in our best interest, not in your best interest. I think this is the single thing that politicians in Africa forget very often, conveniently. And it is our duty to remind them that you hold offices in trust. What joy does it give us when Sudan is destroyed? I have my colleagues who are professors at the University of Khartoum who are with me. No jobs. Painful. And yet you entertain people. These individuals were the same people who are Janjaweed. And you remember Janjaweed means the devil on horseback. They decimated black populations in Darfur, the Zagawa and the Darfur and the Fur. The agenda is to Arabize those spaces. So when we entertain them, what are we doing? Right now, there are 12 million people. You find them in Chad, in South Sudan. You find them in Ethiopia, in Egypt. No vaccination taking place, which means diseases like polio are going to be with us with a bang. Whole generations are dying. What joy, even if you sleep on a bed of gold. What joy. These are the questions.
It was really sad to see the genocide in El Fasher.
El Fasher. Just somebody, people surrender. You tell them to go. Then you shoot them from the back. Never.
At what point does Kenya take a turn? Because we can't be having sports everywhere where we are the people facilitating evil, so to say.
You know, this is one of the better countries in Africa that we must never forget. In terms of the human resource, I dare say the only countries that can compete with us is Nigeria and Ghana. That is, I'm excluding Egypt from the north. In terms of no, South Africa cannot compete with us. In terms of human resource, you go across Africa, Kenyans everywhere. Good. The reason why even the UN finds Nairobi attractive, because we are good. So the majority of Kenyans mean well. The problem is our politics. Who do we have in politics in this country? Who do we have? When your basis of mobilization is to corrupt the electorate and to mobilize the electorate on the basis of their ethnic background, then you get the wrong people. Then you have policies on paper which you honor in breach. And I hold the view that the time is now that we should change. Look at the things we have, for example, even in board management, with something called mwongozo. If Kenyan public boards were to follow mwongozo, we would have beautiful boards. But do we? How do we appoint our ambassadors? Career diplomats are bypassed, and political appointees are given ambassadorial appointments as retirement. They have no idea what diplomacy is all about. And yet somebody who has labored to be a diplomat for years is ignored and bypassed. We must rethink our position as a leader. Remember, as I speak now, Kenya holds the chair of East African Community, and we also hold the secretariat of the East African Community. If the community collapses, the baby will have died in our hands as a country. Can we afford that luxury? Will history be kind to us? Kenya should be operating with a sense of urgency in the region to ensure that this ship is steadied during our watch. In the region, you see how we lost, our candidate lost the office of the AUC to a little country. Djibouti does not have embassies in more than 10 countries in the country, but we lost because of poor diplomacy. You are dancing and celebrating in Addis Ababa before we won. We must ask, when you go through those spaces, and I talk to many retired ambassadors in Kenya, and I ask them, do they ever come to you to consult you? They don't. So I hold the view that one of the things as a country that we should do is to ask our political leaders to be humble. Humility. Humility is the mother's milk of true knowledge. And don't be afraid of ideas. The people who come out and say what they say, they may not always be right, but they mean well. Engage them. Ask them. They may not have solution to everything, but get the ideas. Pick their brains. Use the Kenya School of Government well. It is there. They are good people in Kenya School of Government. Use Esami well. Use the universities well. There is no shortage of resources. But unfortunately, I listen to some of the people who are now the opinion leaders in Kenya saying, oh, wafinye Tanzania, you punish them, Uganda, you bring them here, we finish them. Somebody says that on national television.
And they're a senator.
Yes, and they are senator, and they are not punished. What do you mean? Finish them? Kill them? And nothing happens. A bishop in Nyanza made a statement which, on the basis of the fact you cannot quarrel with, a group of young men and women have said they are going to visit him. What do they mean? Our institutions must be allowed to work so that the culture of impunity is killed for this generation and generations yet to be born. The universities in this country are on a strike, public universities, for over 2 months. In other countries, that would be a crisis of major proportion for which parliament would convene. Nothing. Kenya must provide leadership through humility, through consistency, through compassion, and through good neighborliness.
We have a lot to work on.
We have a lot. Our plate is full.
Yet we want our tentacles out there instead of dealing with what we have. Okay. The other day, just going down further, the other day, Trump cancelled the G20 visit, or is it participation from the US. We know J.D. Vance was supposed to come. And of course, he was actually supposed to come in Kenya after that, either before or during the G20 meeting. But then Trump said South Africa is a no-go zone because genocide of white people is still happening. Yet in May, we had the president of South Africa in the White House. They showed videos of Congo and everyone was like, why is Trump after South Africa?
Two things. I think South Africa is bearing the brunt of foreign policy that is difficult to understand from the United States of America, what I call gunboat diplomacy from the United States of America. And I think South Africa is being punished for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, you dared take Israel to the International Court of Justice for Gaza. Sin number 1. Sin number 2, you dared say that you have the muscle to broker peace between Ukraine and Russia. Who are you? Sin number 3, you dared join BRICS, an organization that is giving prominence to China, Brazil, and India, and is talking about de-dollarization. Those are the three sins. The others, that there is genocide, there is no such genocide in South Africa. In fact, some South Africans who had gone to the United States have gone back. They have discovered that life is nicer in Western Cape, in Durban, and in Johannesburg, and in Free State. But if you want to kill a dog, you give it a bad name. So the idea is to punish South Africa, and is therefore being given a bad name. And of course, Western media can be very effective by propagandization. And that is what is being done, propagandization.
How will they get themselves out of this?
They must be bold, they must be courageous. And that is why some of us always take the view that the only way in which Africa is going to immunize ourselves from bullying is to speak with one voice as Africa. Because if you are dealing with Africa, then you will not isolate countries and deal with them in the manner that Nigeria is being targeted, the manner that South Africa is being targeted, Zimbabwe is being targeted, the Sahel countries are being targeted. My own view is we must move with jet-like speed, easier said than done. Either if we can't do it initially as African Union, let's do it as regions, SADC, ECOWAS, East African Communities, Central Africa, Maghreb, and if we, the Horn, if we do that, then how do you deal with us? But unfortunately, because in Africa, we also love it when our neighbors are being punished. I am quite certain that there are certain leaders in Africa that are happy that South Africa is being dealt with in the manner that is being dealt with. Divide them, keep them weak, and dominate them. That is what is happening to Africa. And that is how you see the United States of America behave that way. The European Union behaves that way towards Africa. And even individual countries behave that way. The French will behave that way. The British will behave that way. It is the same thing that they did in Berlin in 1884 and 1885. Déjà vu. Divide
2.0
and conquer. Indeed, you've got it so very well.
So if for instance, if Vance was to come, what do you think? What conversations was Kenya going to?
I do not know. You know, the United States of America is now so unpredictable. They may cancel today and and revive it tomorrow. But this must be seen in the context of fighting China. The United States of America is now upping the ante in Africa, knowing as they do that the Chinese, in very subtle diplomacy, are occupying space in a number of countries. The Russians are also occupying those spaces. Turkey is also occupying those spaces. And I think the whole idea was to come and remind Kenyans, we are traditional friends, new UN agencies are moving from the US and they are coming here. We have historical ties. Therefore, continue to be a good boy, good girl, so that we may favor you. We can extend AGOA. We'll give you a few more billions. The IMF and the World Bank will be more favorable to you. We can invite you once again to the United States on a state visit and you feel nice. So it's all geopolitics in the spirit of divide and rule, in the spirit of the new scramble for Africa. That is what the conversation would center around.
Okay. Again, Trump said that he's going to send his men in Nigeria because they are persecuting Christians. What has Nigeria done this time?
I think the problem of Boko Haram in Nigeria and in Nigeria generally does not lend itself to very easy answers. Nigeria, as we know, has had a complex and difficult history. In the manner in which it came into being, we know the Biafra civil war, the wounds are still there. We know the recent problem in eastern Nigeria with the IPOB. We know the history of men. We know the history of Boko Haram. And the conflict is a lot more complex. And therefore to say that you are going to bomb Nigeria to solve the Boko Haram problem is really to misunderstand the situation. If you want to deal with it, I think it is important to engage Nigerians at all levels. And once you engage them, then you will be in a position to determine the areas and points of intervention. And the beauty of Nigeria is that there are people who understand the problem. If you talk to the former president Olusegun Obasanjo, he understands the problem. If you talk to individuals such as former Abdusalam Abubakar, the former president, he understands the problem. If you talk to Goodluck Jonathan, he understands the problem. If you talk to people in Biafra such as Nnamdi Kanu, they understand the problem. There is no shortage of individuals in Nigeria, both in the past and in the present, to appreciate what the problem is. And it is important that you engage with them. And to say that you are going to bomb a sovereign country is also unfortunate. And this is why I've been saying a lot more recently that I think the UN has reached the stage where the League of Nations reached in 1940s, that it now needs thorough reform. I mean, people are now ignoring the UN, and its institutions are being led to the slaughter. If we say that nations are sovereign, that you respect nations, how can the head of one nation say that I'm going to bomb another nation without even consulting the leaders of that nation? And the ECOWAS is not angry. African Union is not angry. African heads of states are not hungry. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, is not angry. He has not spoken. His own country, the Senate and the House of Representatives, have not censured their head of state, because that would be a declaration of war.
But all these organizations you're mentioning across, when anything happens, the best they do is, we have noted with concern.
Yeah.
And
I call
it's
them
like a chat GPT.
In fact, I think they just revived them and date them. They have no teeth. This is why they are to be reformed. Because international diplomacy is the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest and the dying of the least suitable. And if you are weak, you'll be dominated. And that is why a bigger Africa, the things you say to Nigeria, you would not say if we are talking about Africa. How you deal with China and Russia is very different from the way you deal with individual African countries. That's why you see some people who are considered malcontents by the United States of America are being sent to Africa. Go to Eswatini, go to Rwanda, go to Uganda, come to Kenya. People who are saying these ones are bad.
Yeah.
Africa is the junkyard, if you may.
Africa says,
can you believe
we
it?
will take them, no problem.
What greater contempt can there be for a people once humiliated by slavery, dominated through colonization, and being humiliated through neocolonialism, and accepting it and swallowing it lock, stock, and barrel?
Sad. Wow. As we close, which way for Africa? I mean, ECOWAS, Africa Union, EAC, SADC, all of them.
In Greek mythology, they say when they opened the Pandora's box, the only thing that remained was hope. But there is the hope of the hopeless. I believe that there is hope, and my hope is in younger Africans. But that does not mean that they have all the answers. It is an intimate relationship between those who are older and well-meaning and knowledgeable to work with younger population who, as they said in Kenya, they are courageous, they are tribeless, and they are people who are committed. So I think if we harness that youth energy and give it proper guidance and leadership, it is going to be the engine that will change the way Africa orients herself going forward. So the time now is to stop agonizing and to begin organizing.
Wow. Fantastic. That's
Thank
a
you.
great way to end it. Thank you
you.
so much, Prof, for coming through.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have you, and people on the channel appreciate your views so much, and
By
they love
God's
you.
grace.
Yeah, so we read all the comments, so
Thank
it's
you.
good I pass them to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the journey to One Africa.